Vamos nessa! Malandragem, só sai daqui quando essa roda acabar. Se o meu mestre Maria tocar, capoeira é antiga.
That's a snippet of what an experience at a capoeira circle can sound like. These circles are a place for music, dance, and martial arts. It's such a broad mix of arts that we don't even know how to classify capoeira in Brazil. How can something be a dance, a martial art, and a music style all at the same time? Well, I guess capoeira can. But capoeira was not always seen with good eyes by society. Today considered an intangible cultural heritage of humanity by UNESCO, its practice was forbidden by law until 1940. Created and practiced by slaves brought to Brazil from the African continent by the Portuguese colonizers, today capoeira is widely practiced throughout Brazil. However, the legalization process and capoeira's broader penetration and acceptance into society took a while to be consolidated. And many will say that this is still an ongoing process. Capoeira was recognized as a sport in 1972. The Brazilian Confederation of Capoeira was created in 1992, and Brazilian schools were only allowed to include a capoeira master in PE classes in 2015. But when did this process actually begin? Getúlio Vargas ruled Brazil from 1930 to 1937 as a president, 1937 to 1945 as a dictator, and 1951 to 1954 as a democratically re-elected president. Vargas intended to build a national identity and support patriotic causes, which fostered cultural developments in the country. During this transformational wave, cultural manifestations with black roots that were often put aside, such as samba, found a place in the political sphere and in the media through Vargas' incentives. Vargas put into place specific guidelines to regulate and institutionalize these cultural manifestations and allow for them to take place in the public space, thus openly introduce them to the Brazilian society. And it was during this period of time that capoeira started being seen by Vargas as something to be celebrated rather than condemned. Stemming from this change of mind, the first capoeira academy, run by Mestre Bimba, was authorized to open its door in 1937, with the school being accepted under the guidelines of physical education practice. You see, one of his focuses under patriotic causes was having physical education in schools, ideally taught by someone from the military, and capoeira was a useful means to build physically strong citizens. This idea is reflected in his iconic speech of 1953, when Vargas met with Mestre Bimba, one of the most important capoeira figures, and publicly stated that capoeira is the only truly national sport. This new political discourse around national identity thus changed the way in which until then ostracized cultural manifestations, and capoeira in specific, are now incorporated throughout Brazilian society. And there you go, a brief summary of the storybook version of capoeira. But I would like to present another perspective on the acceptance process of capoeira, one which puts the capoeiristas at the forefront of history. Nowadays, this new take on capoeira's history is possible given the recent shift in historical research to include subaltern voices in the process of history making, resulting in high-quality academic resources available to the public, to which I am eternally grateful for, as without them this podcast would not have happened. Even before Vargas explicitly stated his support towards capoeira, or it was even officially legalized, capoeiristas in the state of Bahia, in the northeast of Brazil, were already organizing public capoeira performances. In 1924, a local newspaper reported the first performance without police interference, showing a more normalized view towards it. But it was Manuel dos Reis Machado, also known as Mestre Bimba, who changed the relationship between capoeira and the public on a larger scale, and helped steer the debate towards the acceptance of capoeira. In 1936, the newspaper Estado da Bahia published the following text. The presentation of capoeira will take place on the evening of July 1st at 10 at the main plaza in a barrack specially constructed for this purpose. The manager of this interesting fight will be the well-known local teacher Manuel dos Reis Machado, accompanied by his colleagues. This demonstration will be accompanied by 2 berimbais, 3 tambourines, and a ganza. This article shows a shift in how capoeira was portrayed in the news. It goes from something to report to become something to be advertised. It specifies the date, time, and local of the performance, showing that the intention of this piece is to invite people to attend the performance. It also has an informative character with respect to the art of capoeira itself, specifying the instruments to be used and how many of them will be used. If you are unfamiliar with these names, it might not have been so obvious to you that a berimbau or ganza are musical instruments. And this probably went right over the heads of people unfamiliar with capoeira when they read this news. However, the intention of not further explaining what these names mean can indicate that capoeira and its instruments were already so widespread throughout the state that no further explanation was needed. Also, this snippet places the media as an active agent collaborating in the acceptance process of capoeira by divulgating its practice and indirectly inviting more people to participate in as viewers. The newspaper also explicitly mentions the name of the organizer, a further indication that socially, capoeira was not seen as something illegal. But to better understand the relationship between Mestre Bimba, or Manuel dos Reis Machados, and the media, this interesting piece published by the A Tarde newspaper in 1937 will give us an interesting perspective. Today, the famous capoeirista Mestre Bimba showed up in our newsroom to report being attacked yesterday at 10:40, when he was going uphill on Vila América at Engenho Velho. Mestre Bimba told us that a group of police officers, led by Barra Preta, were fooling around there when, without any provocation, they attacked the young man. Mestre Bimba tried to extricate the young man from the hands of his assailants. He was attacked with a sword, but was not wounded because he used the capoeira techniques and managed to get the young man out of there. Plot twist. There are a few things going on here. First, Mestre Bimba is admitted at a newspaper office and is the main source of the piece. Second, the newspaper is willing to publish a story against the police in favor of a capoeirista. And third, Mestre Bimba is comfortable with publicly stating that he stood up to the police. Well, to be fair to the last point, Mestre Bimba does go up to the media the very next day after the incident, probably hoping to get on people's good side before the police even thinks about retaliating. But nevertheless, it shows that he's confident that the public opinion alone will spare him of the consequences. The newspaper deciding to characterize the police officers the way they did is also fascinating. It shows that the militia is not untouchable, and characterizing them as a group that was fooling around and are the assailants of a young man hints at a dissatisfaction from the newspaper and perhaps public towards the police. Finally, Mestre Bimba being admitted at a newspaper office and being the main source of this piece also shows a shift in the social dynamic of the city. You see, slavery had been abolished only 50 years before this article was published, and black people were still very much an outcast of society, pushed out to the slums and facing bad work conditions with little to no possibility of social mobility. And Mestre Bimba was not only black, but also associated with candomblé, an Afro-Brazilian religion commonly practiced by capoeiristas, and not well perceived by the Catholics. As mentioned before, capoeira was created in Brazil by the slaves being brought against their will from different African nations, mostly from the west coast of the continent. In addition to being a way for them to defend themselves against the white man, capoeira was also a form of celebration and spiritual manifestation, with its catchy rhythms and dance moves taken from their home nations in Africa, in particular from Congolese and Yoruban cultures. In these societies, dance and music were seen as the channel to communicate with the spiritual world and were thus widely accepted and valued throughout society. On Brazilian soil, these ideas clashed with the already established colonizer European perception regarding these practices. Christian Europeans saw dance as the antithesis of spirituality, since body and soul where things should be kept separated. The different perceptions of dance on different continents added a new layer of prejudice against the black population in Brazil, as the European perception was the dominant form of thought in Brazil. Additionally, European journalists would come to Brazil and report on what they saw in capoeira circles, calling their postures indecent and their dance moves provocative, thus further influencing how people perceived capoeira. Now that you have some context, you might understand why having Mestre Bimba playing such an important role at the newspaper shows an initial pushback from the media alongside capoeiristas against the bad stereotypes associated with black people and their Afro-Brazilian heritage. Although Vargas did set the legal terms for the acceptance of capoeira nationwide, pulling it out of the criminal code in 1940 and allowing for the first capoeira academies to be opened in the 30s, the capoeiristas themselves played a big role on pushing for capoeira's acceptance to the Brazilian society. Mestre Bimba in specific, and his relationship with the media, introduced capoeira to the general public from the capoeirista's perspective, as something that was there to be appreciated, introducing a new music and dance style. And why not, as something that was there to protect them from police officers fooling around with innocent people.